Hello authors, future authors, book enthusiasts, and anybody who might have stumbled upon this channel. My name is M.A. Kennedy. That's M.A.Kennedy, and I am a self-published author. My premier historical fiction novel, The Rolling Pin, is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. If you are new here, please hit the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified whenever I post. I post videos about how to progress in self-publishing, writing in general, and I'm going to be doing a series on inspirational authors in the upcoming future, not to mention some blogs on travel and whatever I feel like it. So if you'd like to support this channel, please hit that subscribe button. Today's video is going to be on the pros and cons of self-publishing. So you might be asking yourself whether you'd like to self-publish or traditionally publish. So for this video, we're going to solely be focusing on self-publishing as it is something I have personal experience in. I'm going to be doing a list of 5 pros and 5 cons so that we can keep this simple and easy. Hopefully this is informative for you and helps you on your journey to becoming a better writer. Pro number 1. When you're self-publishing, you have complete creative control. Now what I mean by this is you have no limitation. If you want to write a sci-fi, romance, young adult, fantasy crossover, you can do that. Sometimes in traditional publishing, it's a little difficult to mix and match your genres. Publishers are looking for a structured format that they know they can sell on their shelves. But when you're self-publishing, it's up to you to decide what you think is good content. You also have creative control over things like book cover design, which I personally found to be the most fun when going on this whole process. You also have control over word count, which was a big deal to me as my particular story usually would need to have 80,000 words to be considered for its genre. It was historical fiction, adult, but I ended with something like 50,000 words because I felt like I told the story in that amount of time. It was fast-paced, it was a little bit of a crime drama as well, and so I wanted to keep the pacing going through each chapter and not slow it down with extraneous detail that I felt didn't need to be there. So because I self-published, I could do that and I didn't have to worry about being rejected by an editor or a publishing house because I didn't meet the word count or having to add more than I felt I needed to. You can also decide what platform you want to publish your book on. You can use Amazon KDP, you can use Lulu, you can use Ingram Spark. There are a host of others. I talked about quite a few of them in another video, but it's totally up to you who you want to distribute your book. Number 2, you get to keep a larger amount of your royalties. So since we just talked about getting to choose who you're going to publish with, that means you can look at how much they're going to give you for, let's say, an ebook or a paperback, and you can decide which one is the best fit for you. Amazon, for example, I think you keep something like 70% of your royalties from your ebooks. I can't quite remember the amount for the paperback, but it's quite high. If you're savvy enough to do a print-on-demand company and distribute your book yourself, you're keeping almost all of your profit because you are the one distributing your book. I, however, did not want to go that route as it's a little overwhelming to me. So with traditional publishing, you have to pay your agent a percentage, which is usually between 10 and 15%. And then, of course, the publisher gets a large percentage, and the author, if you have a good deal, maybe you get 25% of the profit. Number 3, I already kind of talked about this, but no word count. This is a big one for me. There are reasons for the word count, and I do think that they're important in traditional publishing, but I like the fact that when you self-publish, it's totally up to you. If you want to write a huge novel like Stephen King, you can. Maybe you're going to have less buyers because people will be intimidated by this big, huge novel and you don't have the fan base that he does. But you have to decide what is good for you what's your end goal? If your goal is to get rich, then maybe you want to stick to like the standard practices, and good luck. It's not that easy, but if you have a story to tell and you think that every single one of those words counts, then you can leave them in there and you don't have to either shrink or make your book bigger. Number 4, you pick your editors. So this can be both a blessing and a curse. For me, in the beginning, it was more of a curse because I didn't really know what I was doing. I ended up choosing the first editor that sent me a message because honestly, I didn't even know that other people had messaged me that were interested when I posted my job on Upwork. Embarrassing to say, and I would have chosen differently, let's just put it that way. But learn from my mistake and research what kind of editor you need and want. This means that you can choose your content editor if you need a content editor. You can choose your copy editor, your line editor, your proofreader, and you can handpick, anybody else that you want to help you along the way. And this can be very intimate because you get to work one-on-one with this person you chose. You get to construct the contract, so you can say precisely how you want it edited. If you get traditionally published, then the publisher is going to provide your editors for you. So if you're someone who actually feels anxiety about having to choose an editor, maybe traditional publishing is better for you. But if you're someone who gets excited about the idea of kind of being someone's boss, then self-publishing might be the route for you. Number 5, quicker to publish. So in many cases with traditionally published books, you have to find an agent first, and so you will send out a lot of queries. The amount really just depends on if an agent, jumps at your book or not the first time around. And after you query and you get your agent, then you have to go on submission, and your agent then steps in on your behalf and will send your book to several editors. How many is up to the agent, and this can be a challenge because maybe in your first round of submissions you get rejected, and then you have to do a second round or a third round, and finally, maybe the day comes you do finally get picked up by an editor and they have to agree on a contract. And once that's agreed, your book still won't be on the shelf because then it has to go and be edited by the team that will be assigned to you. And after it's edited, they have to think about cover design, and after cover design, they have to think about marketing. And so there's a lot of things that go into traditional publishing that take a lot of time that you can kind of skip over with self-publishing. Self-publishing, maybe you write your book in, let's say, 6 months, you have your first draft, then you do several edits, and you get it to where you want it to be at about a year from the date you wrote it. Then you send it to editors, beta readers, critique partners, the lot. Once you have that perfect copy that you think it's the best it can be, and you have your cover design already done, all of the above, you can put it on the self-publishing website immediately. You don't have to wait for someone else to make that decision for your book to be put on a shelf. So that is a major, major pro of self-publishing. Now we move on to the cons of self-publishing. And there are some heavy ones to consider. Probably the biggest con is the cost to self-publish. Because you are the person in charge, you will be bearing all of the costs up front. Now, I'm going to do a video on what I spent on self-publishing, but it really wasn't enough. And I will tell you why when I do that video, but it can be upwards of $1,000, $2,000, maybe more that you spend before you even get your book into the hands of an audience, because you have to hire all the editors yourself. You have to, if you're working with a content editor, that's going to be quite expensive just in itself. And then you need your copy editor for sure. Don't skip out on that. Potentially, I would say you could do line editor or copy editor there. You don't have to choose both. Then you also need your proofreader, and I highly recommend not skipping on the proofreader. This is something I did and I really regret. Do not skip out on the proofreader. You need a good proofreader. Unless you know somebody who is in the writing community and would offer to do it for you for free, I wouldn't ask like mom or dad to proofread your novel for you. I would prefer, if it was me, a professional. And then of course there's the cover design, and cover design can be quite expensive. And this is another thing that you should not skip out on. If you're thinking about self-publishing, please do not create your own cover. It's never gonna look professional. People are just gonna bypass your book on Amazon if they see that your cover is not professional. And there are plenty of places to find artists who specialize in cover design, but you have to be willing to pay their price, and it might be quite high. And you can go with someone who's new to the industry to get them at a lower cost, or someone who has been in the industry for a long time, who has a lot of experience. Might be very expensive, but that's up to you. You get to decide your budget. But if you don't have the money to spend on these kinds of things, you can still self-publish, but it's going to be a lot more difficult for your book to get noticed if you don't have these professional aspects to it. 2, having to market yourself. This one can be fun, but it's also extremely challenging. So let's say you have like 3,000 friends on Facebook. That's fantastic. But those 3,000 friends are not going to help you market your book. A few of them might reshare your post, a few of them might heart eyes and like and everything, but that doesn't mean that people are buying your book. So you have to start pretty much before your book even comes out. Start talking about it, start joining writers' communities, and really build up an audience before you even launch. And many writers are introverted, and so I'm one of them. I am not afraid of public speaking though, so I was formerly a journalist, and doing this actually comes quite naturally to me because I spent at least 2.5 years in college doing this, so that's okay for me. But many people did not have a background in journalism, so it might be difficult for them to start a YouTube channel because they don't feel comfortable in front of the camera. Or they don't want to start a podcast because they don't know how to upload, the features of a podcast. You can start a blog, you can do Instagram, you can do all these things, but it's still challenging because it's not like people are going to be engaging with you overnight. Now, I'm not saying this to discourage you because I don't have the most followers in the world, but I'm still going for it. So, you got to start somewhere. And if this is something you're passionate about, you should put your feet in the water and just go. Number 3 is not something that I consider much anymore, but it is something to note. There is a stigma around self-publishing, or there was. Maybe there's still a little bit of that. When you self-publish, everybody knows that anybody can self-publish. I mean, I could write, the worst book in the world, not edit it, finish the draft, never look at it again, and post it on Amazon. Amazon isn't making sure that my content is good. They're just there to host it. So there can be this idea that when you self-publish, you're not necessarily a real author. But I just wanted to note that because you might find that criticism at some point in your journey, but please banish that idea from your mind. There are plenty of self-published / indie authors, whatever you'd like to call them, that are amazing, excellent authors. And they chose to self-publish on purpose for the reasons I listed in the pros, and maybe many other reasons I didn't even say. There are a lot of benefits to self-publishing. So just to put it out there, you might get some criticism from self-publishing, but please forget the haters. 4, finding the right editors, and I already kind of talked about it, but so you'll be the one finding your editor. Remember how I was talking about that can be a blessing and a curse? Well, I kind of lumped a formatter and an editor all in one, and I thought that would be fine. I asked for a copy editor who could also format my book. My editor was pretty good at copy editing, but in my opinion, she was more of a line editor. And she started to use her voice way too much. And I find this not to be a good attribute in an editor. You should be making suggestions to your client on how they could improve the story, but not changing the story so that it no longer sounds like the author's voice. And there were times when I went back and I read things that she had corrected and I thought to myself, that's not me, I didn't write that. That doesn't sound like my voice at all. So I had to go back in and change it back to something I would say, and that's not how you want to be operating with your editor, especially when you're paying them out of your own pocket. You might also not know what kind of editor you need. Maybe you really do need a content editor, but you haven't researched that and you didn't know that you needed to get one. So you bypass that and your book really isn't where it needs to be. If you were getting traditionally published, you'd have editors to recognize this and they'd be working with you on the level that they felt they needed to get your book to be the best version that it could be. So if you're going to go into self-publishing, do a lot of research before you do. Figure out what kind of editor you need, what kind of budget you have, and make sure that you make the best version of your book that you can possibly make. 5, less support. Now, what I mean by less support, it's kind of a culmination of all the things we talked about before. As you're not going to have a giant or even a mini publishing house behind you to help you market your book, to get you on a plane, to put you in book festivals, meet and greets, book signings, all of these things you're either going to have to do or you're going to have to bypass. Before COVID crisis 2020, I actually had planned to do a small book signing back in my home state of Atlanta. If you haven't watched my videos thus far, I actually live in France. My husband is French, so we are settled near Lyon. But this was all coming out of my pocket. You know, I would have to fly back to the US, and next year, hopefully if things are better in the world, I will be attending some book festivals. I'm going to re-release a copy of The Rolling Pin very soon. As I stated, you know, I had some editor issues and some issues with type font, so I am fixing it and republishing it, and I'd like to take it on tour. But this is something that I have to do myself, and I have only just broken even on what I spent on my book. So I am now making a profit, but it's not a big profit. And so I have to reinvest that money into putting myself out there. Whereas if I was traditionally publishing, then the publishing house would not always, but sometimes pay for my travel. One thing I will say that, you know, traditional publishing is not, it doesn't mean you don't have to do any work. So even if you do have the publishing house fronting these types of costs, you're still going to have to market yourself a bit too. And sometimes they won't pay for your travel, and so you'll still have to put yourself out there. So in closing, I want you to consider all the things that we talked about, and you can choose the best path for you. And whatever it is, it's the right path because that's what you feel you need to do. There is no, there is no bad author because they decided to self-publish. So after considering all the pros and cons, do you think you'd still want to self-publish? I have to say that I don't regret it at all, and the self-publishing community is very supportive that I've found so far. I mean, granted, I'm new to this community, but I'm championing other authors and women authors especially in the community. I'm finding that there are genres of books that I actually would not consider in the bookstore. If I went to Barnes & Noble or something like that, I probably wouldn't pick up this book. But because I know a fellow indie author has written it and they poured their heart and soul into it and put a lot of money into it, I want to support them, and so I'm going to buy a copy. And maybe this will lead to me discovering some genres I didn't know that I liked. And maybe your future book could be one of those too if you decide to self-publish. As always, if you like this video, please hit the thumbs up button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon to get notified whenever I post. I have an exciting new series coming up very soon. I'm going to be starting it in July. It is going to be the Influential Author Series. I will feature 5 authors. I will go through the history of these authors, and at the end of each episode, I will do a writing exercise inspired by the author. So if this interests you, please don't forget that subscribe button. And remember to come back. And if history is not your thing, you could stick around for my travel vlog that I'm going to be doing during the month of August. So I probably won't be able to upload until either the end of August or the beginning of September, but I am going to several medieval villages in France that will help set the backdrop for my current fantasy trilogy that I'm writing. I'm going to be vlogging my whole experience, and you can come along with me as I explore these medieval castles, the ramparts, the beautiful streets, and experience French culture. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. I hope you're taking care of yourself. See you next time. Bye.